All right. So now we're going to talk about two different facets of operant conditioning. And these are called shaping and schedules of reinforcement. And we're going to dive into these right now, starting with shaping. So, operant conditioning is pretty cool because it can get humans and other animals to learn to do really, really complex behaviors. So it doesn't just learn to reinforce simple behaviors, but you can also teach really complex behaviors. This is how trainers at SeaWorld get dolphins and whales to flip through hoops and stuff like that. This is through operant conditioning. How is this possible? It's particularly through a facet of operant conditioning called shaping. And this is reinforcing simple behaviors and molding them into a more complex one, which is what we're going to be talking about right now. So, this is a facet of operant conditioning called shaping. It is kind of its own type of learning, but it is definitely part of operant conditioning. It is kind of for complex behaviors, it's the step you need to have occur before operant conditioning. So, shaping is guiding behavior by rewarding closer and closer approximations to the target behavior. So, rewarding closer and closer behaviors to what the behavior you want them to have. So, this is basically reinforcing baby steps. So, start off with something really small towards the behavior, and then grow more and more towards being pickier to get to the target behavior. And once they have the very baby step down, then you only reinforce the next step. And then so on and so on. Then once they have the next step down, you go a little bit further. So you can do this with so many things. You can do this with teaching a pigeon to bowl. B.F. Skinner is a really famous behaviorist who really popularized shaping and really saw the importance of it. He actually talked about in one of his papers how he just decided one day in his laboratory that he wanted to teach a pigeon how to bowl. And he couldn't teach it right away. He couldn't just give a ball to a pigeon and the pigeon would throw it down a lane and hit pins down. Pigeons don't know how to do that. It didn't work. But if Skinner would slowly mold that behavior for the pigeon, then he could train them to bowl. So what he would start with is he would reward them for going near the bowling ball, and then touching the bowling ball, and then nudging it, and then nudging it in the lane, and then then forcefully nudging it down the lane, and so on. And this is also use how you teach your dog to roll over. So first, you reward it for sitting, and then you reward him for laying down. And then you have to reward him for going on his back. And then you have to reward him for getting all the way over, doing the whole thing. Laying down, getting on his back, and then getting back over. The whole motion. And then you have the whole behavior. So, let's see an example of this in real time. This is a person teaching a rat how to fetch. So, not just dogs can learn how to fetch. My cat can fetch, and you can teach a rat how to fetch as well. So let's see how you can do that. So she starts out with rewarding any sort of interaction with the ball, just sniffing it, touching it. That's good. The ball is good. It's quick to learn that one. Like, yay, we like the ball. And now she's moving on to grab the ball. Rats like Cheerios. They like most food, really. See, you grab the ball. Good job. Oh, but he's doing an old behavior now, and that's not going to get reinforced. It's only going to get reinforced now for behaviors that are past the previous ones. Okay. So soon, we'll be bringing the ball to her. So it won't just be good enough to touch the ball or to grab the ball, but now the rat has to move the ball towards her while grabbing it. Has to do all of that. Silly little rat. If you find rats gross, I'm sorry. But they're really cute. See, now she's getting the ball further away. Oh, gotta eat. Ah, look at that. Really getting it. And now she's ready for fetch. By the way, that clicking noise is a clicker. A lot of animal trainers use that as a signal that that is a good thing and you're going to get food for it. So even if the animal isn't looking at the trainer, they can hear that sound and think, oh, that I'm doing something right. All right, so that's pretty cool. You can teach a rat how to fetch by shaping. You can teach it how to grab a ball. And then you can even teach it something more complex than that from that. Something like, I don't know, playing basketball?
Live here at Wofford College, Spartanburg, South Carolina. We're in McMillan Theater. I'm here with Peter. Couldn't ask for a better day here, Kenny. What's your predictions for today? I don't know. There's a lot of talent in the rats down here. I really couldn't pick one, but we're going to have to wait and see. And the outcome's going to be unpredictable. So. The objective here in rat basketball is to gain a better understanding of how to shape the rats or shape your subjects to learn how to reward here, and that would be their reward to reinforce the score. And said there's no clock in just the first 211, and 7-0 is the skunk. So, Kitty, will you please do the honors? All right, well, tip-off about to begin. 3, 2, 1, let's play rat basketball. All right, let's see you guys have the ball. See what you can do with it. He's got good handling skills.
Stole the ball. Rat basketball's getting savage.
I've never seen a match like this in my life. I am truly speechless right now. Pandor's attention to the ball is 9-5 now. 10-5. Pandora needs one more point, ladies and gentlemen. 100 feet. Here she goes.
Oh, you can have a full-on rat basketball tournament. That's amazing. So, you may have noticed that they were reinforcing every single time that the rat made it into the hoop. So, once that behavior is learned, do we really have to reinforce every time that behavior happens? That sounds like a lot of work, you guys. Ugh. And it's also doesn't sound possible to do this in every situation, you know? Can we really reinforce every single time that our kid does their homework or goes to the bathroom when we're trying to properly, when we're trying to potty train them? So this is where schedules of reinforcement come in. These are different methods of reinforcement, and they're based on when an individual is rewarded for their desired behavior. So you don't have to reward every single time. That is one schedule, but there's other schedules as well. So, a continuous schedule is the behavior is reinforced or punished every time it occurs. So you get money for every A you get in high school, or you get spanking every time you say a bad word. A partial schedule is a behavior is reinforced or punished some of the time, not always. So, being praised by your supervisor when they see your good behavior, but you know, maybe you do a lot of good behavior, but they don't always see it. Or maybe you slack off a lot and they only see you do good behavior. Or getting grounded for sneaking out, but only when you get caught. You sneak out a lot and you don't get caught a lot. So, partial schedules of reinforcement. There are ratio schedules. So, this is when ratio is tied to behavior. This is how our reinforcement is tied to behavior. This is how many times you do a behavior will determine when you get reinforcement. And then interval schedules are when reinforcement is tied to time. So how long time has passed will determine when you get reinforcement. And then within these, they can also be fixed schedules or variable schedules. And so fixed schedules are the number of responses or amount of time that has passed is the same each time, always. So it is fixed. You have to make 5 responses always. It's always 5 seconds before the next reward. Or it can be variable schedules. So the number of responses or the amount of time that passes is irregular, but it usually has an average. So maybe you get reinforced an average of 5 times every time you do a behavior, but it might not be every 5th one. It might be the first one, and then you won't get one until the 8th one, and then you might get one immediately after that. But it all evens out to 5. So a fixed ratio, FR, is a certain number of behaviors that must be performed before reinforcement. So how we refer to schedules of reinforcement are with these. So the FR stands for fixed ratio, and then the 5 stands for how many responses have to be made for a reward to be given. So this means that every 5 responses, a reward is given, which is an FR5. And what's interesting about fixed ratio is it has this thing called a post-reinforcement pause. So after you get your reward, after the 5th response, people and animals tend to take a break because it's very predictable. You know that once you sell 5 chocolate bars, you're going to get $10. So you did a good job. You sold 5 chocolate bars. Time to take a break. I'm tired. All right, time to sell more chocolate bars. All right, I got my another $10. Let's take a break. So this is a very normal thing to see. And this is different from a variable ratio because behaviors are rewarded on an average after a specific number of attempts, but it's random. So a slot machine might have a VR, so variable ratio, of 20. So that means the average reinforcement rate is 20 responses. So, but some of these reinforcements might be back to back, and some might be 40 times in between rewards. You might have to make 40 responses before getting rewarded again. It's variable. So this makes it really hard to guess the schedule. And that makes it really, really high responding rates. People and animals keep working consistently when they don't know for sure when they're going to get rewarded. So if you notice here, this is a much higher line than the fixed ratio. And there's no post-reinforcement pause. They keep working. And then there's the fixed interval. So this is when the next behavior is rewarded after a set time has passed. So one thing that you can think of is class exams. So each exam is set at a fixed time, which students are aware of and studying will be rewarded for once you take that exam. So your exams are about 4 weeks apart. So this would be an FI4. It should have weeks in parentheses there because really with intervals it's always measured in seconds And I really don't want to calculate how many seconds are in a week, so I just kept it with 4 for weeks. And this also makes fixed intervals predictable, similar to fixed ratios. Fixed schedules are predictable because you know exactly the timing or the number of responses you need to make. So another example of this is when you're trying to sleep in, but your animals wake you up because they know it's time for you to feed them. There's a specific time in the morning that you usually wake up and you feed them. But today, you're still asleep? No thank you. And what we see here is scalloping. So it's a little different than the post-reinforcement pause. So we see this really lack of work after a reinforcement, and then it just really amps up right before reinforcement. And you can kind of think of this with class exams, really, because when you're studying, right, because a class exam is a reward for studying. You can think of it as that. So after you take your first exam right here, you're probably not going to study afterwards, right? I mean, even though we're covering new material, it's probably not going to be your studying phase too much here. But then, as the next test comes closer, you're going to start studying a lot more. So, that is why it ramps up really, really fast. And that's where you get that scalloping. And finally, there's the variable interval, VI. This is when behavior is reinforced after a variable amount of time has passed. So, every once in a while rewarding your dog for going potty outside could be an example. So, you don't have to reward it every single time, because that would be a lot of treats. Your dog might be obese. But you might do a VI of 3. So on average, 3 days, on average, every 3 days or so, you would reward your dog for going outside, but you might do it 2 days in a row and then not reward them for the next 4 days, and then reward them again, and then not reward them for 2 more days, and then reward them again. It can vary, but it should average about 3 days. And this is also really hard to guess the schedule, similar to variable ratios. It keeps the responding steadily high. It's not quite as high as variable ratios, but it's still quite high. And it does not have that scalloping you see in fixed intervals. So how do these compare? Overall variable ratios, you see the highest amount of responding and the most consistent. This graph doesn't show that post-reinforcement pause for fixed ratios, but fixed ratios and variable intervals are about similar in level. Fixed ratio might be a little bit cause a little bit more responding rates, but it does use that pause, so there will be stops in responding. Variable intervals might have lower responses, but it'll be consistent responses. And then there's that fixed interval, which is the lowest amount of responses, and it's really inconsistent responses. So overall, if you want really high responding, go for variable ratio. If you want really consistent responding, go for variable ratio or variable interval.